on the News Channel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. Good show tonight. We are talking about the caregiving. Are you someone who is the sole caregiver to someone who really depends on you? We want to hear from you. We want to talk about that. And we're going to bring into this important topic the whole issue of the opioid crisis. How are opioids even making what you're already doing more difficult? We have with us Peter Rosenberger. He has been on before, radio host, and he's written a book about this, the book Caregivers with Hope, right?
Well, the show is Hope for the Caregiver is the book.
Hope for the Caregiver, okay. An important topic, and I just want to start with how did you even get into this?
I'm married into it. I fell in love with a beautiful woman who had been hurt. 34 years ago this week, she was a student at Belmont University here in Nashville, and my wife Gracie, and she was on a trip to go visit a friend. Middle of the day, she fell asleep at the wheel. She just put her head down and slammed into a concrete abutment near Paris Camden exit on I-40, and I didn't know her at the time. I was in another state. It was a pretty bad wreck. I mean, almost.
And there's the picture you see.
Yeah, it was a horrific wreck, and Evel Knievel kind of wreck. And they didn't think she'd live, much less walk again or have any kind of life, but she did. She came back to Belmont, and friends introduced us. You got to meet this girl. She's just a fabulous person. And she really is. And they said, but she was hurt in a car wreck. You need to know that. Well, I didn't have any frame of reference of what that meant to be in a relationship with somebody who was hurt. She'd had about 20 major surgeries that I could count before I met her. But she still had her legs at that point. And since we've been married, she's had now at least 78 surgeries that I can count. Both of her legs she gave up in the 90s, one after each son. The doctor said, look, if you guys are going to have children, you need to have them while you're young. So I said, well, okay, baby, I got a prescription for this. We got, doctor says we got to do it. I don't know if that's covered under Obamacare, but I bet it's covered under Clinton care. Oh, sorry about that, y'all.
Right.
But after our oldest son was born, she gave up the right leg, and she did real well, and surprisingly well, because the lower legs that took most of the brunt of this thing. And then when she had our second son, she ended up giving up her left leg. And she's done pretty well with that. She's had seasons where she learned how to snow ski as a double amputee.
Wow.
But the rest of her body has also been pretty brutalized, and her back and so forth. And so she's lived with severe pain since Reagan's first term, and it's never gone away. And as a caregiver, we've had, let's see, 80 plus doctors, 12 hospitals, 7 different insurance companies, well over $10 million that I can count. It just keeps going. I mean, it doesn't show any sign of slowing down, and I've been a caregiver now for 31 years.
So you've been in this world for 31 years. I guess are there a lot of people out there that are maybe in a similar situation that feel alone?
Oh, caregivers suffer from 3 I's. We lose our independence, we lose our identity. Ask a caregiver, how are you doing? Well, she just got home from the hospital, or he had a bad night, or our situation. They don't know how to speak in first person singular. And then so we lose our independence, our identity, and then we're isolated. And that's a problem that plagues every caregiver. And in that isolation, that's when bad things happen. Dark thoughts come. We get all turned around. You start believing everything you think, and it'll take you down some bad roads. I know, look at me, I'm only 25. Look what it did to me. Don't let this happen to somebody you love. I mean, this is what'll happen.
And so is there enough support out there?
No.
And what can be done about this?
Well, I take that back. You have to, no, it's not, they're not going to come get you. You have to raise your hand and say, I need help. And you have to start building your own team around you. And this is why I do my show. This is why I write, I speak on this, and do everything I can to penetrate into that isolation with a very, very focused message for caregivers. I speak only to caregivers, for caregivers, about caregivers. Somebody said, well, aren't you limiting your audience? And I said, when I exhaust the 65 million Americans right now that are serving as a family caregiver, I'll worry about expanding my audience at that point. But there's a huge need for this.
Because I haven't heard a great deal of talk about it. Now maybe once you get in that world, It's out there.
If you love somebody, you will be a caregiver. If you live long enough, you will need one. It's just that simple. And the aging baby boomer population, for example, 10,000 a day are stepping into senior status. The strain on America's families right now taking care of the baby boomers is enormous. They're saying that $1 trillion in wealth will be transferred just to take care of the baby boomer population. 1 trillion with a T.
And so then you put into this the opioid crisis. And I think it's fascinating you're kind of taking it in that direction. But how is this situation that is impacting so many across the country also impacting caregivers?
Well, who's picking up the scripts at the pharmacy? Who is sitting there getting patients back and forth to the doctor's office where these things are? Who's helping them count out all these pills? Who's helping manage these things? Who's helping make sure these things don't go off the rails here? That's what caregivers do. You show me a patient on opioid, a chronic pain patient that a doctor's prescribed this for, and I'll show you a caregiver. And but the problem is, and this is what brings me into this equation, Ben, I have received street value, millions of dollars of scripts of opioids that I've picked up at the pharmacy. We had one drug alone that was $15,000 a month. We did for 4 years, just for
Good
one drug.
grief.
And I have picked these things up, taken them to her, help manage these things. And all the doctors that have written scripts, all the pharmacists, all the nurse practitioners, none of them ever said, hey, dude, we're putting a lot of chemicals into your wife's body over a long period of time. You might want to get some help for yourself. You might want to get some counseling. You might want to see a support group about this, because it's going to be a rocky journey. And anybody that tells you it's not, they'll lie about other things, because it is a very difficult thing to do this.
Have you tried, so all right, you're putting all of this into her to make her feel better. Have you tried to wean her off?
Well, I don't do that. That's what the doctors do. I try to, one of the things I tell people, the 3 Ps when it comes to being a caregiver, the 3 Ps of dealing with doctors, you know, you be prepared, you be polite but not subservient. You know, I've had doctors kind of get in my business a little bit with it, and I looked back at one doc, I said, hey doc, with all due respect, I was taking care of her when you were in junior high school, so let's keep this in perspective. And then you stay out of the pharmaceutical conversations, because a lot of times we caregivers tend to be a little bit more articulate, and if you've got somebody who's on heavy medication, the doctor needs to see how they respond on that medication, not me trying to run interference.
So if they ask a question, you don't answer it.
Yeah, that's the problem. And so I had to learn to bite my tongue and learn to like the taste of blood sometimes. But I learned that you can go from being a caregiver to an enabler in about that fast. And so you want to be aware of what's going on. You want to assist, but you also have to realize your place. I can't stand between her and her doctor. I've got to let them work it out on whatever the needs are. And her pain is significant. I've seen the MRIs, I've seen the CT scans, the x-rays, and I'm been around this long enough to know what they mean. It's real. There are a lot of people out there dealing with this, with real pain. You can't just turn the spigot off for these people. But at the same time, there's other things we need to be considerate of. Another thing with caregivers. What about these caregivers who are saying, okay, I've got a bad back because I've been lifting somebody all the time. She's not going to miss one Lortab. And all of a sudden, the caregiver's dipping into the drug. Or you have a paid caregiver taking care of your mother who broke her hip, and you're out of town, but that paid caregiver's there, and maybe she wasn't feeling too good, or her boyfriend's not feeling too good, or whatever. She'll take one. This stuff is happening. And so if we're going to go after this approach, yeah, let's deal with the El Chapos of the world, but we got to understand that there's some significant issues going on right in our own homes. And we need to help educate people, provide resources for them as far as where they can get help. It doesn't necessarily mean more money, it just means better intel.
The opioid crisis, it's so frustrating, just the enormity, just how many pills are out there.
Oh, it's staggering.
I feel like we've talked about it on this show, the overprescribing. There's a concern among a lot of people, they're just overprescribing. Maybe it's doctors are too willing to just throw pain pills at a situation, and then the person doesn't need them, and then maybe some of these things you're talking about, somebody else says, well, maybe I could take that, or it's sold on the street or whatever. You've had a front row seat to a lot in our medical system. Is that something you've seen?
Oh, constantly. There is so much abuse of this, sanctioned abuse, that it's just people are going in, oh, doc, I got a headache, oh, here, take this, and then they go out the door. And they're trying to crack down on this. And this is something, we had a real problem with this in Tennessee. At one point, we had like the highest Medicaid prescription numbers. I mean, for the average number of scripts for a patient on Medicaid, it was like one of the highest in the country. I think we had like 16 scripts. It
was when TennCare was keeping those kind of absolutely.
It was
astounding.
Insane. And Lortabs and Oxycontin and all this, they're just being slung out the door.
And so do you blame the doctor? Do you blame the drug company? What do you blame there?
I think there's plenty of blame to go around. But what's the solution? And the solution is, first off, better education for all parties, including caregivers. What to look for, when to see if somebody is going down a darker path on this thing. How do you back it up? What does help look like? Where is help? Who do you call? What do you do? These are things that we need to constantly be putting out there, and it's not a one and done. I think it has to be done consistently. I know how to give an injection. I don't need somebody to train me on that again. But on these kinds of things, it's a moving target. It's like nailing Jell-O to the wall. So you have to constantly engage with people who are just now coming into this world. You just said you've never done anything like this.
Right.
Well, guess what? Then you will.
I know. Yeah.
And when it comes, you'll need somebody to say, here's some things you need to look out for.
All right, we need to take a break. That kind of sets the table for what we're discussing. There's the number if you want to call, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Brian, I see you're on the line. Hold on. We'll get to your call. If you want to call in, we'll take your call right after this.